Welcome to Fin Essential, a podcast for anyone who wants to learn about business and entrepreneurship. I'm your host Vishnu.
And I'm your co-host Sahil. On this show, we dive into the world of business by sharing valuable insights by interviewing successful entrepreneurs.
Whether you're a seasoned business owner or just getting started out, this podcast is for you.
Tune in to understand essential elements of building a successful business. Thank you.
Hi Caroline, thank you so much for taking our time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
To kick things off, can you maybe tell us a little bit about your background and what sort of inspired you to start this entire VIVACE consulting firm?
Sure. So thank you for having me. So I spent about 15 years working in law and finance, and mostly with multinational companies. So I was looking in the energy industry, finance industry, construction, media, and I decided that I wanted to pivot after about 15 years and create something that I felt was genuinely sustainable, both in its ethos, in terms of its ethics, and also in terms of its approach, what sort of advice it gives to clients. So I founded VIVACE 2 years ago, and it's been a very interesting adventure so far.
That's amazing.
Perfect. Now you told us about how you went into energy industry and how you started 15 years ago. But can you tell us what are the nature-based solutions in the sustainability?
Okay, so basically, maybe I should take a step back. Sustainability is really a philosophy. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of looking at how can we make sure that we take care of people and the planet in the long term. So sustainability is a philosophy, and you can apply it to lots of different areas. You can apply it to education. You can apply it to culture, to business. Nature-based solutions, in the way that we're talking about it today, is applied to business. So it's really looking at how can businesses use nature and partnership with nature and nature-based solutions in advancing their goals and working with local communities.
Okay. Could you maybe give us a few examples of what nature-based solutions are?
Sure. So, for example, one initiative is tree planting. So we're currently working with different landowners in Europe, particularly France and Italy, on how they can restore forests. And also in that process, restore land that's been degraded. So improve soil erosion, improve river flow. That's one example, tree planting. Another example is water management. So water management is basically ensuring that water is retained as much as possible through rainwater, for example, and that water storage solutions are available. So we're currently working in several projects in West Africa on implementing what I would call integrated farming systems that have a very strong water management component. So that's another example. Another example is biodiversity protection. So, for example, working with local communities, particularly in rural areas, to take steps to restore land that has been somehow degraded. And this is something that, it's a long-term project. Nature-based solutions is not something that you generally can implement and, see immediate results. Generally, it requires I would say, working with people in lots of different places and making sure that the approaches are consistent, monitored, and implemented in a sort of steady way over time.
Interesting. And these solutions that you spoke about, they don't just benefit the startups or the clients you deal with, but they also benefit the communities that are there locally.
Exactly.
Right? And you spoke about how you work with communities in Africa as well. So how does it benefit the communities over there? And I imagine if you're going to a country like Africa as a foreigner, you're going to be facing a lot of challenges over there because you don't speak the local language, you don't really understand the environment. How did you face challenges like that? And how do you overcome them?
Yes. So basically, I would say the philosophy that underpins what we're doing in Africa is what we call community-led development. Now, the traditional development model is something that tends to be quite top-down. So, for example, policy decisions might be made in Washington or London or Paris by development banks and development institutions. And then they choose projects to be selected on the ground, and then they finance those projects. Here, what we're doing is sort of turning that upside down. So instead of beginning with the development institutions, we're beginning with the communities.
Okay.
And what that means is going and first trying to just understand and discuss what they do currently and what they want to do. So community-led development and all of the projects that we're doing in Africa are based on this idea of first going to the community, understanding, what are they producing today? What would they like to produce tomorrow? It could be plantain, it could be cassava, it could be sweet potato, it could be different fruits. And, what, for example, across a very, very large stretch of land is the common theme between all of these communities.
Yeah.
And so where we've ended up in at least Sierra Leone for one of the projects we're doing is transformation of cassava, which is a staple crop all over Africa.
Yeah.
And you can also make flour from cassava. So it's helping communities strengthen the portion of the value chain that is currently quite weak. A lot of cassava is essentially wasted currently because there's not a lot of infrastructure to transform it, to stock it, and then to distribute it widely. So going back to your question, there are obstacles, but a lot of these obstacles can be eliminated when you actually first try to understand what's needed, understand what's wanted, and then once you have a project or a concept that the community has developed itself, then you can work with companies like VIVACE, which will then take the project and then bring it to the development institutions and bring the project also to corporations who have all of the resources that are needed on the ground.
That's interesting. I've never thought of sustainability as a two-way thing where it benefits communities and corporations because so far whatever I've read, I've always said it was one-sided. It only focuses on impact and not profit, but it's really cool that it can be both ways.
Well, yes, it can actually be very, very, I would say, complementary. Farming is something today that, it's become very globalized, it's become very industrialized, but there are a lot of farming solutions that are natural offsets to a lot of what industry is already doing. For example, the oil industry, they're already doing drilling, they're already doing, massive logistics operations. Instead of drilling for oil, they can drill for water. Yeah,
that's true.
Now you spoke about corporations, community-led development, and nowadays we are seeing that technology is playing an important role in sustainability. So how do you set a balance between technology and nature-based solutions?
That's a good question. So my goal, I would say, is to find the right place for technology, because technology, we're very much in this era where, our lives have been so improved so quickly by technology, but we don't also want technology to dominate us either. So for me, the next challenge of, humanity in a lot of ways is to find how do we put technology in its place so that it doesn't overtake human interaction. And I think that when you look at sustainability and investments, it's important to first invest in the real economy. Invest in energy, invest in food, invest in education, water, all of the basics that people need to survive, but also to succeed. And then once you have a thriving ecosystem, see where technology can be brought in to enhance growth. There are a lot of countries that are really ripe for digitalization in Africa, but there are a lot of countries where it's really too premature. And the projects that I'm working on are principally farming and agricultural projects, in which case technology can have an important role in terms of, weather, for example, looking at weather trends. Also, there are different predictive technologies to see, how can crop yields be predicted. So technology can have an important role, but it's unwise for technology to have the center stage in a country like this.
Correct. That makes a lot of sense. I think we've spoken to a lot of startups that deal specifically with sustainability tech, and they're doing really well. A lot of them focus on the African region as well. There was this one very cool startup we spoke to which focuses on coffee alone and how the carbon released by coffee can be maintained if you're tracking it properly, which is very cool. And when you spoke about all these tech companies and climate tech, I think I really love venture capital, And I remember, you know Y Combinator, right? All the recent posts from Y Combinator, you see these very big climate tech startups getting valuations of 100, 200, 3 million, $300 million, which seems crazy. And I don't know if it's a bubble or not, but it is really crazy.
Well, yeah, it could be a bubble. I mean, it's too early to tell, but I think that, one of my main goals when I work with communities is to try to get on the radar of tech investors, because even though our projects today are too premature to have a significant technology investment, if you have advice from tech people early on, you can design a project that will later have an important tech component. So I'm very much in favor of collaborations with technology companies, but again, I think that it's about focusing first on the core essentials, what is going to be produced by the ecosystem, and then slowly bring in technology as an enhancement tool.
Okay. And as of now, I think there are a lot of young people that want to get into sustainability, but they do not know where to start, especially for a country like India. There is no courses on sustainability. You just have engineering, you have medicine, law, and there's nothing that's exclusively focused on sustainability. I think it's changing in a lot of parts in Europe. I think there are masters in sustainability programs right now. And do you think these programs are worth it, or do you think there are other alternate ways for people to enter sustainability?
I think both works. I think that, if somebody has access to a master's program, I think there are some phenomenal ones in Europe that are very affordable, especially compared to, some other countries. For United States, for example, education is very expensive. You can get a very good education in Europe for a very reasonable price, and there are also lots of scholarships available. That said, you can also be, and be sustainable and implement sustainability wherever you are. You can do it in your kitchen by doing recycling, by doing composting, by working with a local school. So you don't necessarily have to come to, a big city and learn, their way of doing things. You can also learn first about your own community, learn where's electricity coming from, learn where's water coming from, learn how is the waste management handled. All of these things, are equally applicable in Paris as they are in India. That being said, once you've done that local analysis, it is not, it's a great idea also to then go to a different ecosystem and see, what can I learn here? And then what can I perhaps bring back home? Best practices, contacts, so this sort of thing.
Amazing. I think the other person that is on our team, she's moving to, she's going to start a master's in sustainability at ESSEC. And she's the kind of person who always talks about sustainability and says, my carbon footprint is becoming too much, which is very funny because I've never heard of people talk about that, especially when they're 22, but we're learning from her. So hopefully we become more sustainable in the process too.
So you told about we take back waste practices, and so can you give some examples of such practices where if a community or individual wants to get involved in sustainability, what is the initiative he or she can take?
Okay, so I'll give some examples of practices that can be applied in lots of different contexts. So one example is gardening. So here we're in an urban garden. You can create gardening solutions in lots of different ecosystems, even in very, very densely populated cities, because you can do urban gardening, you can do roof gardening, you can do vertical gardening. So I would say, even in a window, you can plant some small flowers and even some herbs. So I would say, yes, gardening is a great solution that can be implemented in lots of different ecosystems. Another example is obviously recycling initiatives and circularity solutions. So for example, even the clothes that we wear, we can organize parties, we can organize events where we exchange clothes, where we repair clothes, where we also repair household equipment, for example, a toaster or something that's been broken. These things are all, there's the technology and the information on the internet that teaches you how to repair small appliances. And another thing is actually pooling resources together. So, for example, here we live in Paris. A lot of people consume bottles of water and bottles of milk, which generally, if you go to a supermarket, you can only buy 1 liter at a time. But if you live in an apartment building or in a community with lots of families, there are certain things that you can buy together. And so you can save money, and you can also save on the packaging. Packaging, especially in Europe, is a really big challenge because we have so many single-serve packages that it's just pure plastic and it's just purely wasted. Even if there is some recycling, if it ends up in a landfill, it's going to be there for a very long time.
Got it. I remember seeing this startup from Spain. I don't remember its name, but they make biodegradable soap covers. So you just unwrap the soap and then you just leave it in the shower and it dissolves or disintegrates, which sounded very cool because I remember having a lot of soap covers back home. I still do, so I think that was really cool. While on this topic, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the sustainability industry? I study finance, and I think something which is very popular was ESG in finance. And I have this professor, I don't attend classes from him, but he's this guy called Ashwat Damodaran in NYU. And he's very popular because he thinks ESG is a fad. And there are other people, I think there's this guy called Alex Edmonds at LBS who thinks ESG is a very legit thing and startups should start focusing on this. But what is your view on the challenges that lie ahead for the sustainability industry?
Okay, so the first challenge I think is greenwashing, which is a universal challenge, and it's going to be very difficult to remedy, even with ESG frameworks. Which can be very helpful in terms of comparing companies and comparing performance, but they're also flawed in certain ways. So greenwashing, even if you prove performance, prove emissions, there is a certain amount of, I would say, inherent uncertainty with this type of approach to sustainability. And so I think one of the challenges is, when we look at companies and multinationals today, a lot of them are taking a more ESG approach, which means they're looking at data, they're looking at their existing operations, and then they prepare data reports, which are useful, but they're also flawed because sometimes there are a lot of assumptions. For example, if you read in Carbon Disclosure Project, there's a lot of footnotes that will say, okay, well, we calculated it this way, but we excluded this company because we only own 10% of the company, or we excluded this operational site because we don't actually have full operational control over it. So when you take into account all of these different I would say assumptions, you come to a place where it's actually very difficult to have perfect comparability. So the ESG approach, I think, is useful for some things, but it's also flawed in a lot of ways. The approach that I advocate is more one of what I would call offset. In other words, operational offset, not just carbon offset, but the idea that if you have, a building, a business that is inherently polluting or inherently, requiring a lot of energy consumption or water consumption, the agriculture in a lot of ways is a natural offset to industry, because there are positive environmental benefits in terms of carbon and methane offset, but also the creation of food. There's a wonderful concept now called the food forest, which is a project that not only involves building and restoring forests that have been degraded, but also slowly populating them with trees and shrubs and plants that produce food. So fruit, but also nuts. And so, again, it's very difficult to dispute what you see that's real. Carbon emissions is something that's, much more, abstract. And I suppose it presents more of a greenwashing risk. Because each company will calculate it in its own way and take its own assumptions. Farming is real, it's nourishing, it can't be disputed. And so for me, I tell my clients, go into an offset project and one that involves nature.
That's true. That's really amazing. We came across this scandal called the Vera scandal I think a month back or something, where different companies were calculating their carbon offsets using different formulas and different methods. And when an investigative agency went and actually calculated it, it was off by 90%.
Yeah.
And that was unfortunate. So I think what you say makes a lot of sense, and a company should start doing that.
Yeah.
And you told about setting sustainability of in nature ways or offset. I remember this in my studies. I came across that during Olympics they made a whole Olympics venue with natural vegetation, and right now they are using it for rooftop gardening. So now there will be such projects happening all around the world, and everyone is doing it. But can you tell us about what exactly VIVACE is doing, or any of your projects which you are currently focusing on?
Sure, I'll give you a few examples. So in the agricultural space, we're focusing a lot, like I said, on integrated farming systems. So again, that's helping rural communities analyze, leverage, and fund their projects on a bigger scale. Okay, so that involves doing an analysis of what they want to produce, enhancing water, enhancing logistics, and then sort of trying wherever possible to keep the value in the country, because chocolate is a very good example of something that is exported mostly by two countries, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and yet all of the chocolate in the world is mostly produced in Europe. So it's a country that has its cocoa beans that are sold for not very, much value. And the chocolate is not actually being made in the country. So one of the things that we're trying to do is do the integrated farming system, enhance the whole value chain, and try to keep that value in the country wherever possible. Another example of a project that we're working on is in the more downstream food space. So we work a lot with restaurants and also bakeries. And here, this is a good example of where technology can be a wonderful solution. The project in question is called Copain. It's a project that originated in Italy by the Banco Alimentare, which is the food bank of Rome. And they essentially created a platform that puts in contact people that have excess food, restaurants, pizzerias, bakeries, and people who need food. So, for example, associations, charities, basically anybody who is in a situation that's somewhat vulnerable can have access to this platform. So it's an idea that's really based on, circular solutions in the food industry. Another example of a project that we're working on is in the education space. So we've been partnering with several business schools, including one in Morocco, on creating a social impact incubator. And it's an online course. Well, it's a hybrid course. There's an online portion and there's an in-person portion. And the idea is to train students like you while you're in school to become entrepreneurs. Exactly what you're doing right here. So you have your studies, and you also have your podcast and your video activity. And this, if you start doing it while you're in school, you have a business that's ready by the time you graduate. And so it's a great way for people, especially people who are living in very rural parts of the world, to say that, okay, they don't necessarily need to go to New York, Paris, or London to get a good job. They can learn what they need to learn, slowly build their business during school, and then when they graduate, they have something that's viable.
That's interesting.
So that's another project that we're working on. And then I guess I'll give an example of one more project, which is in the art and culture space. And I'm working with an association called Alive. And here we're really trying to mobilize artists to use their work in advancing the awareness that's necessary on the ecological transition. So here we're really focusing on, again, teaching artists to have the right skills, to think like entrepreneurs, to have multiple income streams, and to use their work to further a social goal. So those are a few examples of my current projects.
Perfect.
You spoke about, when you were talking about projects, you spoke about a social impact incubator in a way. And I think a very big challenge that I personally faced when I was starting this was I did not know what to do. And even right now, my goal in the long run is to be an entrepreneur. And I think it took me around 4 or 5 months just to find a good co-founder. And after that, I spoke to tons of different people, and the only thing they told me was you need to test your hypothesis now. But I have no idea what that means, because there are no resources out there on the internet as well. The resources out there are very scattered. There isn't any one good reliable source. So what kind of prompted you to start working on this, and how do you think more students can maybe become entrepreneurs while they are at school or in school?
So basically the idea behind the Social Impact Incubator is really to give students who are in rural areas the tools to create value where they are.
Okay.
And this is motivated by the fact that I've spent time. My family is originally from the south of Italy, and for a very long time it was understood that you either needed to go to America or to the north of Italy to make it big, right?
Yeah.
Well, now actually with the pandemic, we've learned that there's technology that makes it possible to communicate with people all over the world and to work closely with people all over the world. So now is a wonderful time to decentralize some of the cities. France is an example of a country that's very, very centralized.
Yeah.
Lots going on in Paris. But since the pandemic, there are wonderful regional cities that, have really, come back to life in a lot of ways, or have had some sort of renaissance, because people can work remotely. And there's very good train service in France between Bordeaux and Nantes and different, regional cities.
Yeah.
So the Social Impact Incubator is based on this idea that, we should be encouraging medium-sized cities to grow, and the youth has a very important role to play in that. And in order for them to create their own businesses, they need to have the right tools. So they need to understand, what is a business model, what is a pitch, what is a SWOT analysis, what is sustainability. And so the course that we offer, and we're looking to adapt it into different countries. So happy to hear your ideas and those of your colleagues. But the idea is really to take, to give students for free the tools that they need to create a concept. And then there's a pitch competition at the end of the weekend.
Okay.
And some of our students have had really good results with their concepts, which, it will take time for these concepts to become businesses. You might need research and development. You need to do, a lot of piloting. You need to test the concept. You need to refine the concept. But all of this can be done while you're still in school.
That's true.
And so instead of, doing 3 years of studies and then realizing in a panic, oh no, I need to find a job. If you've been slowly working on your concept, maybe after 3 years of studies, you can launch your business. Or maybe you can go and work at a company that does something similar, and you will be able to join the company at a higher level because you already have some kind of operational experience.
Makes sense. I think even in my family, or even in India in general, for a very, very long time, it was like, go to school and then go to grad school in the US and get a job over there. But it's changing a lot now.
Yeah.
People want entrepreneurship to grow in India, and especially in the rural markets for some reason, because there's a lot of people feel that there's a lot of untapped potential in the rural markets, and if you learn how to sell to them efficiently, you will probably reach product market fit faster than you do in like the bigger markets that are there in the bigger countries. So I think it's really cool. We were speaking to this guy who used to run a D2C brand in India, and I think something I really liked about him was he did not sell to the tier 1 cities in India, even though his product was meant for the entire country. He was dealing with medicinal things, so instead he went to tier 2 and tier 3 cities, but he adapted his marketing in a way that he was basically making campaigns in the rural languages. So if there were like 25 different languages, he was making 25 different campaigns in those different languages. And I think in 3 or 4 years, their valuation went to $47 million. And he exited at $47 million, all because he was able to tap into this specific market, which is like mind-blowing to me.
It's amazing. And I think there are so many wonderful programs now that really target rural youth. There's a program that I've been involved with here in France for 2 years called Chemin d'Avenir, which is a mentorship program that partners people who live in big cities like Paris, especially people who have been working for many decades like myself, with youth in very rural parts of the country. And the idea is to sort of change perspectives and just exchange, because obviously, when you're only operating in one ecosystem, you get very sort of used to the way that things are done and the obstacles. When you sort of exchange and share perspectives with somebody outside of the ecosystem, it sort of helps you, I guess, revisit your own ecosystem, but it also helps, bring that person who's in perhaps, what they call la France périphérique, into the periphery, I guess you could say.
That's right. You get a diverse set of opinions, and that kind of elevates your perspective.
Yeah. I think it's a good program.
Amazing. Maybe you can send us a link of this and the one you're working on as well, and
Sure.
we'll put that when we post this too.
Okay, sounds good.
But I think those were all the questions I had from my end as well.
So now you told about projects, and they are really for a great cause. VIVACE is really contributing for a great cause and targeting at each and every sustainability. But yes, before we end, can you just tell our audience or tell our people how can they connect with VIVACE, or how can they connect with you?
Sure. So you can reach us on Instagram. So it's vivace.paris. You can also find me on LinkedIn, or our website is studio-vivace.com. Yes, we're always interested to hear from potential partners, potential clients, potential interns. So do feel free to get in touch.
Amazing.